Welcome to Haldeman County, and thank you for taking the time to complete this accessibility training. Today's session is about building a barrier-free Haldemand and understanding how accessibility fits into the work we all do, regardless of our role. Accessibility isn't just a legal requirement. It's about how people experience our services, our programs, our buildings, and our community. Every interaction matters. By the end of this session, you'll have a clearer understanding of what accessibility really means, your responsibilities under Ontario law, and how small actions can make a big difference for residents, visitors, and coworkers. Please take a moment to scan the QR code and register your name and the date you are completing this training. That way, there will be a record of it. We'll focus on three main areas today. First, we'll talk about accessibility and disability, including invisible disabilities. Second, we'll look at the Human Rights Code and the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, often called the AODA. And third, we'll walk through the Integrated Accessibility Standards Regulation, or IASR, and what it means in practice at Haldeman County. A disability can be physical, mental, sensory, or cognitive. It's anything that may affect how a person experiences and interacts with the world. A barrier is anything that limits a person's ability to fully participate in activities, services, or opportunities. Barriers aren't always obvious. They can be physical, like stairs without a ramp, but they can also be digital, communication-based, or attitudinal. It's important to remember that many disabilities are invisible. These are disabilities that aren't immediately noticeable but still have a real impact on someone's life. Because invisible disabilities can't be seen, they're often misunderstood or overlooked. That's why it's important to validate people's experiences, avoid assumptions, and never pressure someone to disclose a disability. In Canada, 27% of people aged 15 and older live with a disability. That means accessibility affects a significant portion of the people we serve and work with every day. In Ontario, accessibility is guided by two key pieces of legislation: the Ontario Human Rights Code and the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, or AODA. The Human Rights Code protects individuals from discrimination on various grounds, including disability. It applies to areas like employment, housing, goods and services, contracts, and unions. One of the most important concepts under the code is the duty to accommodate. This means organizations must accommodate disability-related needs up to the point of undue hardship. Accommodation is individual ongoing and based on a person's specific needs. The AODA works alongside the Human Rights Code. Its goal is for Ontario to be fully accessible, and it sets clear, province-wide standards for accessibility in services, workplaces, and public spaces. The AODA applies to both public and private sector organizations and requires us to plan ahead and remove barriers before problems arise. The Human Rights Code and the AODA work together, but they're not the same. The Human Rights Code has primacy, meaning if there is ever a conflict between the two, the code comes first. The AODA sets the minimum standard. The code may require us to do more. The AODA is proactive. It focuses on preventing barriers before they happen. The Human Rights Code is often reactive. It addresses discrimination after it has occurred, such as through accommodation requests or complaints. In practice, this means even if we are meeting AODA requirements, we may still need to go further to meet someone's individual needs under the Human Rights Code. There are three key takeaways to remember. First, know your obligations under both the Human Rights Code and the AODA. Second, the duty to accommodate is individual and ongoing. It's not one size fits all. And third, accessibility is a shared responsibility. It's not just one department or one role, it's everyone. The Integrated Accessibility Standards Regulation, or IASR, is part of the AODA. Let's walk through how Ontario's accessibility laws are structured, from the highest level down to the detailed requirements. At the very top of the framework is the AODA, the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act. This is Ontario's main accessibility law. It sets the vision and the legal authority for creating standards that help the province become fully accessible. Underneath the AODA sits the IASR, the Integrated Accessibility Standards Regulation. The IASR is created under the authority of the AODA, and it brings together multiple accessibility requirements into one regulation. The first part of the IASR is called General Requirements. These requirements apply to all organizations covered by the law. They include things like establishing accessibility policies, creating multi-year accessibility plans, and ensuring employees receive accessibility training. From there, the IASR branches into 5 specific accessibility standards. These standards outline what organizations must do to remove barriers in key areas. So, in summary, the AODA comes first. The IASR sits under it. The general requirements apply across the board. And then 5 accessibility standards guide organizations in different areas of accessibility. Here are the 5 standards under the general requirements: customer service, information and communication, employment, transportation, and design of public spaces. At Haldimand County, these standards guide how we design programs, deliver services, communicate information, and build public spaces.
When something is developed for the first time, its design typically reflects the technology advancements or limitations of the time. As time goes on, through a process of rethinking, trial and error, we find improvements that benefit even more people. Improvements that make a thing we've created not only better, but that also make it more useful for us all.
A man in a motorized wheelchair enters a restaurant and moves up to the counter.
To create a province where every person who lives or visits can participate makes good sense for our people, our businesses, and our communities. That's why we're making Ontario accessible to all. How do we do that? We do that by striving to remove barriers. Barriers to accessibility are obstacles that make it difficult, sometimes impossible, for people with disabilities to do the things most of us take for granted. Barriers aren't just physical things, such as steps into a bus or a door without a push-button opener. Information that a person can't easily access or understand can be a barrier. For example, when the print is too small on a brochure for someone with vision loss to read it. Technology, or lack of it, can prevent access. Even everyday information technology, like telephones and computers, can present barriers. Organizational barriers occur when policies, practices, or procedures don't take accessibility into account. Attitudinal barriers are about what we think or assume. For example, assuming someone with a speech impairment can't understand you. Removing barriers doesn't have to be complicated. Mostly, it takes a slight shift in perspective. Approximately 1.85 million people in Ontario have a disability. That's 15.5% of Ontario's population. As the population ages, it's expected that the number of Ontarians with a disability will increase, as will the need for accessibility. In 2005, the Government of Ontario passed the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, also known as the AODA. Its goal is to make Ontario accessible by 2025 by creating and enforcing accessibility standards. These standards are rules that businesses and organizations in Ontario have to follow to identify, remove, and prevent barriers so that people with disabilities will have more opportunities to participate in everyday life. Standards address key areas of daily living, such as customer service, information and communications, and employment. Several accessibility standards are contained in one regulation under the AODA. It's called the Integrated Accessibility Standards Regulation, also known as the IASR, or simply the regulation. The IASR also includes a section of general requirements that apply to all the standards in the regulation. This regulation is now law, and requirements are being phased in over time to meet the goal of an accessible Ontario by 2025. This gives organizations time to make accessibility a part of their daily business. It's important to note that the standards do not replace requirements established under the Ontario Human Rights Code to accommodate persons with disabilities to the point of undue hardship. They also do not limit obligations under any other legislation. If two laws conflict with one another, the AODA states that the law that provides the higher level of accessibility is the law that must be followed. Compliance deadlines for the requirements vary based on the size and type of an organization. So it's important to know how the regulation defines different types of organizations. The regulation applies to every person or organization that provides goods, services, or facilities to the public or other third parties, and that has at least one employee in Ontario. Organizations are grouped into 5 classes. The Government of Ontario, including every ministry, the Office of the Premier, and the Legislative Assembly, including constituency offices of the members of the Assembly. Large designated public sector organizations with 50 or more employees, including municipalities, hospitals, school boards, colleges and universities, and public transportation organizations. Small designated public sector organizations are those with fewer than 50 employees, such as the Ontario Office of the Fairness Commissioner and some municipalities. Large organizations are those with 50 or more employees in Ontario. This includes private sector organizations such as businesses and not-for-profit organizations. And small organizations are those with 1 to 49 employees in Ontario. In this module, you will learn about the general requirements. This section of the regulation outlines the requirements for accessibility policies, accessibility plans, training for employees and others, procurement processes, and self-service kiosks. Accessibility improvements benefit us all. Accessible buses and exterior paths of travel are not only good for people who use wheelchairs or canes, but help people carrying luggage and parents with strollers. Closed captioning allows both people with hearing loss and a group of friends at a pub to understand what's happening in the game. Accessible documents and websites not only make using a screen reader possible, but also work better on personal handheld devices. Greater accessibility means greater opportunity for Ontario. If we become more inclusive, we really will create a province where every person who lives or visits can participate and contribute to the life of our communities. Doing so makes good sense for our people, our businesses, and our communities. For all of us.
Under the IASR, organizations must have accessibility policies, plans, and standards in place. At Haldimand County, our Accessible Design Standards, Accessibility Policy, and 5-year Accessibility Plan are all publicly available on our website. We are also required to consult with the Accessibility Advisory Committee on key initiatives, including trails, parking, outdoor play spaces, rest areas, and accessibility planning. See if you can take a moment to spot the barrier. You're right, that Braille sign is placed far too high for an individual. They wouldn't be able to reach. While Braille is an accessible form of communication, the placement of it is equally important. Common practice is to place Braille at the height of a door handle, although more specific measurements can be found in the Ontario Building Code. Next, we'll explore the first accessibility standard created under the AODA, the Customer Service Standard. This standard focuses on making sure people with disabilities receive the same high-quality service as everyone else here at Haldimand County.
As a customer service provider, openly communicating and responding to your customers' needs is the key to excellent customer service for all, and that includes people with disabilities. People with disabilities do business, shop, and travel with friends and family, just like everyone else. They are the people you serve. You might call them clients, members, patients, or patrons. Accessible customer service is about treating every customer with the same consideration and respect. Understanding that not all disabilities are visible and that people with disabilities may have different needs. It's just a matter of finding the best way to serve them. It can be as easy as asking, "How can I help you?" and making small changes to your practices. Many of us will experience temporary or permanent disability at some point in our lives. Currently, about 1 in 4 people in Ontario has a disability. That's over 2.6 million people. That number is expected to increase as the population ages, as will the need for accessibility. The Martin Prosperity Institute estimated that by 2031, people at risk of disability and people with disabilities will represent 40% of total income in Ontario. That's approximately $536 billion. With that much spending power, it's essential for a business or organization to be providing an accessible customer service experience. It's the right thing to do, and it's the smart thing to do. By learning how to serve people with disabilities, your organization may attract more customers, build customer loyalty, and improve services for everyone. In this module, you'll learn about the Customer Service Standard and how to interact with people with various types of disabilities.
Inclusive customer service starts with respect and flexibility. Some key principles include being patient and allowing extra time, speaking directly to the person, not their support person or service animal, using plain language, and asking how you can help rather than assuming accessibility doesn't mean treating everyone the same. It means meeting people where they are. Adapt your approach. For example, with hearing disabilities, face the person, speak clearly, and look for communication aids. With vision disabilities, identify yourself and offer your arm if guidance is needed. With mobility disabilities, never touch assistive devices and offer help only if asked. With cognitive, sensory, or mental health disabilities, provide calm communication, simplified responses, and choices. Today, I want to talk about why language matters, especially when we're referring to people with disabilities. The words we use can either affirm someone's dignity or unintentionally reinforce stereotypes. By being intentional with our language, we help create environments that are respectful, inclusive, and person-centered. First, instead of labeling someone as the autistic kid, we use person-first language, the child with autism. This keeps the focus on the person, not the diagnosis. Next, rather than saying someone is confined to a wheelchair, we say wheelchair user. A wheelchair is a tool that provides mobility and independence. It's not a form of confinement. We also avoid using terms like handicapped or special needs. These phrases can feel outdated or patronizing. Instead, we say individual with a disability. It's clear, neutral, and respectful. And finally, rather than assuming anyone needs help, we simply ask, "Is there anything I can do to help?" This gives people autonomy and ensures we're offering support in a way that aligns with their actual needs. People may forget what you said, but they will never forget how you made them feel. This quote reminds us that while people may forget the exact words we use, they won't forget the emotions we leave them with. And because we're human, we will sometimes stumble over our words or get the phrasing wrong. But what matters most is that we show empathy, respect, and genuine care. When our intentions are grounded in kindness, people feel that long after the moment has passed. In this next section, we're moving into the employment standard under the Integrated Accessibility Standards Regulation. This standard is designed to make every stage of employment more accessible, from hiring and recruitment to workplace accommodations to supporting employees throughout their careers.
When it comes to the workplace, it's little things that can create barriers for people with disabilities. Barriers can be in processes, in a tool we use in our work like a computer, an aspect of the physical environment, or attitudes. Listen to this story about a job ad that wasn't accessible.
I found one that sounded just perfect in terms of my qualifications. The position was for a disability counselor. But when I tried to access the rest of the information about the job, my screen reader couldn't read it. The website was not accessible. So I called to ask for more information. The difficulty I'm having is that I can't access the information on your website with my screen reader. So is there someone who can spend a few minutes with me going over some of the information? I'd like to apply for the job.
There's a lot of information here. I don't have the time right now to give you everything, but if you give me your name and number, we'll be sure to have someone give you a call back.
Unfortunately, no one called back, and because the website wasn't accessible, I wasn't able to even apply for the position. The next time I applied for a job, I was fortunate because I found an employer who made sure that their website was accessible, and I was able to read the whole thing, including the history of the organization. I did apply for that job, and finally, I was able to get an interview.
With an ad that wasn't accessible, the first organization missed out on reaching a good candidate. But you know, making an accessible document isn't all that difficult. In this next clip, a project manager talks about how simple physical accommodations at the office made all the difference.
I work in project management for a training company. For me, the first day on the job was a challenging part, but nothing we couldn't work out. The desk I was given wasn't designed to fit a wheelchair. Plus, all the reference documents the information design team used were placed on a shelf too high for me to reach. A different desk and moving the books made everything work fine for me.
According to Statistics Canada, Ontarians with disabilities are more likely to be unemployed or underemployed. By making your recruitment processes and employment policies more accessible, you open your doors to a much larger resource pool. It's a win-win situation. So how do you open your doors? It's all about looking at your human resource processes through an additional lens. Some of you may be familiar with the Employment Standards Act. It sets out the minimum fairness standards for the workplace. The employment standard, under the Integrated Accessibility Standards Regulation, is different. It deals with accessibility in the employment cycle. It builds on the obligations that employers have under the Ontario Human Rights Code. The standard formalizes workplace accessibility processes that many organizations already have in place. And accommodating specific accessibility needs due to disability doesn't usually take as much effort as you might think. The majority of people with a disability require no accommodations at all. A recent study found that when accommodations are required, employers reported that 56% of accommodations cost absolutely nothing to make, while the rest typically cost only $500 or less. For such a small cost, the rewards are immeasurable for your organization, for your new and existing employees, for the bottom line of your business.
The employment standard focuses on accessibility throughout the employee lifecycle. This includes accessible recruitment and hiring individual accommodation plans, return-to-work processes, redeployment and accessible performance management and career development. Accessibility in employment helps ensure everyone can contribute fully and succeed at work. Next, we'll take a closer look at the Information and Communication Standard under the Integrated Accessibility Standards Regulation. This standard focuses on making information, in all its forms, accessible to people with disabilities.
Consider for a moment what you've done so far today. Perhaps you browsed a newspaper on the internet or checked your email. Maybe you attended a meeting or had a casual conversation with a colleague in the hall or through instant messaging. So much of our world today is about information and communications, from chatting with your son or daughter to reaching out to colleagues. But imagine what it would be like if all those lines of communication suddenly became blocked. If, when surfing the internet, some pages just don't work. When you open up a document that you were told contains information you need, such as a bus schedule, it's unreadable. Or what if, while in a meeting, suddenly, it's as if the sound is turned off? If your access to information was turned off, how would you know what's going on in the world around you? How would you make decisions? It would be like entering a world where everything appears to be the same, but rather than finding information that will allow you to participate, you find barriers, always another barrier. The good news is there are solutions to information and communication barriers, for example, technology. For people without disabilities, technology makes things convenient. For people with disabilities, technology makes things possible, as long as they're set up right. For example, if you're following web development best practices, your website may only need a few tweaks to be accessible to those with disabilities. In addition, some accessible solutions can be as simple as reading a document out loud to someone, or providing an electronic version so they can resize the text to suit their needs. Making information and communications accessible is not only helpful to people with disabilities, it benefits us all. A properly formatted document or accessible website displays properly in all browsers, including personal handheld devices. The Information and Communication Standard, as covered in this module, outlines how organizations will be required to create, provide, and receive information and communications in ways that are accessible to people with disabilities.
This slide is titled Accessible Websites and Content. The main message here is that the Information and Communication Standard requires all websites and online content to meet WCAG. Those are the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. Following these guidelines helps ensure that everyone, including people with disabilities, can access and understand online information. On the right side of the slide, there are 3 key elements we need to think about. The first is WCAG itself. This is the standard that tells us how to make web content accessible. Next, we have accessible Word documents. This means creating Word files that follow accessibility best practices, like using proper headings, alt text, and readable formatting. Finally, there are accessible PDFs, or portable document format files. These need to be tagged and structured in a way that makes them usable with assistive technologies, like screen readers. Together, these components remind us that accessibility isn't only about websites. It's about ensuring all digital documents and content meet accessibility requirements so that everyone can access the information they need. This slide is titled Document Accessibility 101. It highlights 5 simple steps you can take to make your documents more accessible. First, use built-in headings so the structure is clear for screen readers. Second, choose sans serif fonts, which are generally easier to read. Third, always add alt text to images so people who can't see the visuals still get the information. Fourth, run the accessibility checker to catch issues you may have missed. And finally, make sure there's good color contrast so text is easy for everyone to read. See if you can take a moment to spot the barrier. Yes, you guessed it. This email has way too many acronyms. And that's exactly the point of this slide. Acronyms can create real barriers because not everyone knows what they mean. They can confuse new employees, people with cognitive disabilities, or anyone unfamiliar with the terminology. When we rely on acronyms without spelling them out, we make information harder to understand. Clear, plain language ensures everyone can follow along without guessing or feeling left behind. Let's take a moment to talk about the transportation standards. Yes, they're part of the overall accessibility requirements, but many of these standards don't actually apply to us here at Haldimand County. The transportation standards are designed mainly for organizations that provide public transit services, like buses, streetcars, or specialized transit. Since we don't operate those systems, only a small portion of the requirements relate to our work. Now, building on what we just discussed about the transportation standards and how most of them don't apply to us here at Haldimand County, this slide focuses on one small transportation area that can still be relevant: accessible taxicabs. Even though we don't have conventional or specialized transportation services, and we don't operate things like ferries or public transit, there are still a few requirements to be aware of if access. First, there's consultation. When determining how many accessible on-demand taxicabs are needed, the Accessibility Advisory Committee must be involved in that conversation. Next is the multi-year accessibility plan. Any progress related to accessible taxicabs has to be included in our multi-year plan, along with the steps we'll take to meet those needs. And finally, taxi fare requirements. Accessible taxicabs are not allowed to charge higher fares or extra fees for people with disabilities. The cost must be the same as it is for everyone else. So even though transportation standards are largely outside of our day-to-day responsibilities, these specific requirements ensure fairness and accessibility where taxi services operate. So now that we've talked about the transportation standards and how most of those requirements don't apply to us here at Haldeman County, we're going to shift to another part of the AODA, the Design of Public Spaces Standard.
Public spaces connect us to where we want to go. When we leave home, we depend on them to take us to everything our communities have to offer. Accessible public spaces provide the important link between places to work, travel, shop, and play. Removing barriers on recreational trails, outdoor play spaces, parking, along sidewalks, and at pedestrian crossing areas will make public spaces easier to navigate, allowing people with disabilities to get where they want to go and giving them the chance to enjoy our outdoor spaces. Today, about 1 in 4 adults in Ontario have a disability. As the population ages, the number of people with a disability is expected to increase. Almost 4 million people over the age of 15 may have a disability by 2033. This means increased demand for accessible public spaces that support independence and mobility. For example, increased availability of accessible parking that can provide better access to shopping and services. Ontario is making public spaces accessible through the Design of Public Spaces Standard. The Design of Public Spaces Standard builds on accessibility design practices we already see emerging in our communities when new public spaces are built, and when major changes are made to older spaces. Though change takes time, considering the needs of people with disabilities from the earliest stages when designing, planning, and constructing public spaces will result in more accessible and livable communities for all Ontarians. Providing the same opportunities for people with disabilities as everyone else allows for people to fully participate in the life of our communities by allowing them to be active and independent. Increasing access to places where people can shop, work, and play is an investment in our province's future. Through these improvements, we really are making Ontario open to everyone. The Design of Public Spaces Standard, as outlined in this module, sets requirements for specific features of our physical environment that will make it easier for people with disabilities to move through, use, and enjoy what our communities have to offer.
So, continuing from the Design of Public Spaces Standard, this slide focuses on what accessible outdoor spaces actually look like in practice. Trails and beach routes need proper surfaces, widths, and signage so people with disabilities can navigate them safely. Outdoor play spaces should include inclusive and sensory-friendly features, and elements like rest areas, slopes, and ramps must meet accessibility standards to support safe movement. Finally, accessible public amenities and rest areas help ensure outdoor environments are welcoming and usable for everyone. Continuing with the Design of Public Spaces Standard, this slide looks at accessible routes and pathways, essentially how people move through outdoor environments. Exterior paths of travel have specific requirements for things like width, surface texture, slopes, and even lighting, so people with disabilities can navigate safely and independently. Pathways also include features such as sidewalks, ramps, pedestrian signals, curb ramps, and stairs, all of which need to be designed with accessibility in mind. And finally, where required, wayfinding elements and tactile surface indicators must be installed. These support people who are blind or have low vision, helping them understand the layout of a space and travel safely. Accessible parking must follow requirements for size, signage, and access aisles. These features make it possible for people using mobility devices to safely get in and out of their vehicles. Service counters also have accessibility standards. They need to provide an accessible counter height and, where required, enough knee clearance for someone using a wheelchair. And finally, waiting areas must include designated accessible seating. This ensures everyone has a safe and comfortable place to wait for services. Together, these elements help people move through public spaces with dignity, comfort, and independence. Next, let's look at the Inclusive Spaces Fund. This is a council-approved budget dedicated to improving accessibility across Haldimand County's facilities, parks, and programs. The purpose of the fund is to speed up accessibility improvements in spaces we already have, so we can remove barriers more quickly and more effectively. It also helps us enhance accessibility for people with disabilities and our aging population, while ensuring we meet the requirements of the AODA. Common projects supported by this fund include things like automatic door openers, accessible pathways to amenities, and seating or benches along trails. See if you can take a moment to spot the barrier. The barrier is clear. This path is not accessible to a large portion of the public. This is exactly why the Design of Public Spaces standard exists. Its purpose is to prevent barriers like this from being built in the first place, so our outdoor spaces are truly usable, not just labeled as accessible, but genuinely accessible for everyone. Lastly, we'll watch a short video. It's a quick reminder that accessibility is about removing unnecessary barriers, so people don't have to struggle just to participate in everyday life. Accessibility is about more than compliance. It's about dignity, independence, and inclusion. Just because we can do something a certain way doesn't mean we should, especially if it creates barriers. Every role in Haldimand County has an impact on accessibility. Thank you for taking the time to learn, reflect, and be part of building a barrier-free Haldimand.